Welcome once again to M5's English language learning program, Let's Speak English. I'm Gav Duncan and I'm here on your TV to help you learn English. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Yes? Good! And are you ready for today's lesson? Yes? Good! Okay, well, let's learn English together. And hello again. Christmas is coming, the geese are getting fit. Please put a penny in the old man's mitt. Oh, hang on. That's not right, is it? No, that's wrong on several levels. For a start, Christmas isn't coming. It's been and gone. Well, Christmas Day has been and gone, but I suppose the Christmas period is still here. We're still in the Christmas period, aren't we? Yes, but even so, that still means that the first line of that song is wrong. Christmas might be here, we're still in Christmas, but Christmas isn't really coming, is it? No, no more than anything is coming. Next Christmas is coming, but that's going to take ages to get here, so it's not really topical, is it? I don't think that the slow advance of next Christmas, Christmas 2019, is really newsworthy. Also, the geese aren't getting fit, are they? Or are they? I've got no idea. Surely that idea is a bit more closely connected to the idea of New Year's resolutions, no? You know, the idea that the geese have a good look at themselves in the mirror at the start of January and decide that it's time to start exercising again. I don't know. Again, we all know that when the geese get fat, it's not normally as a result of them being lazy, is it? No. The farmer wants to sell the geese, and he knows that people like fat geese, not skinny geese. So what does he do? Yes, that's right. He starts to give them more food to eat. He puts extra sugar on their cornflakes, more sugar in their coffee, and he loads their lunch and dinner with carbohydrates. And if that weren't enough, he then gives them extra chocolate biscuits with their afternoon tea. And another thing, what's this "please put a penny in the old man's mitt"? In the original song, we heard that people were urged, encouraged to put a penny in the old man's hat, not into his mitt. And what's a mitt when it's at home? Well, I think it's a short form of the word mitten, which is one of those funny gloves with only 2 sections, not 5. A glove has got separate sections for each of your fingers, but a mitten has only got 2 sections. One section for your thumb and one larger section for the rest of your fingers. This is a glove, and this is a mitten. So, in the revamped song lyrics, I reckon that we're being urged to put a penny into the old man's hand. Only he's got cold hands, so he's wearing mittens to keep his hands warm. And we're being encouraged to drop a coin into his hands, into his mitten, into his mitt. All right, but as we've just seen, that's all wrong. Christmas isn't coming, and even if it were, we've still got suet problems to deal with. So, back to the recipe with the strange and mysterious ingredients. All right, well, we've dealt with the suet question, haven't we? Yes. Hard white fat from the kidneys and loins of cattle. And we need it for some strange reason. A reason I still can't figure out. Still, never mind. This recipe's obviously slightly mad. They want us to use a vegetarian version of animal fat. Mad. Absolutely stark bonking mad. Vegetable animal fat, insane. All right, well, leaving that side of things to one side. If we start thinking too much about things like vegetarian beef fat, then we're going to dent our brains, aren't we? Yes, so to avoid denting our brains, we're just going to ignore that side of the recipe. One more thing about suet and then we can move on. And that one thing is a rather odd idea. In all the recipes that I saw involving suet, they all specified that the suet should be shredded suet. Again, due to the lack, the paucity, the scarcity of information, which is, let's face it, one of the things the internet is famous for. It gives you some of the information, but not all. And due to this paucity, this lack of information, I couldn't find out why this was so important. But then again, seeing as I'm not even sure if I could find suet in the supermarket, I suppose it's not that relevant, is it? What is interesting, however, is the word shredded. The verb to shred means to cut into shreds. And a shred is a strip of material, a long, thin piece of material which has been torn or cut from something larger. Have a look at this thing and tell me if you know what it is. Yes, that's right. That's a paper shredder, a machine which shreds paper. It takes a piece of paper and shreds it. It turns that sheet of paper into thin shreds, as you can see in the photo. The man in the photo is putting whole sheets of paper into the shredder, and we can see what the machine is doing to the paper. It's shredding the paper, and the shreds of paper, which are now almost impossible to read, can be thrown away. That's why people normally use paper shredders. They don't want other people to be able to read what was on the paper. So, by cutting up the pieces of paper into long, very thin strips or shreds, they can make it very hard, almost impossible for someone to read what was on the paper. Okay, so that's shredded paper. But here we're not talking about paper, are we? No. And as we've just seen, we sometimes see the idea of shredding involved in cooking. Think about something which has become very fashionable in the world of cooking. Pulled pork. Essentially, with pulled pork, the meat has been cooked very slowly over a low heat so that it becomes tender, not tough. Pulled pork is very, very tender, and when it's tender, it can be pulled apart very easily. Pulled pork. Okay, and what form is the pork pulled into? Yes, it's pulled into strips, into shreds of pork. So when you ask for a pulled pork sandwich, the pork will be shredded. If the pork comes in one piece, tell the chef that they made a mistake. All right, so shredded, shreds of something, in this case, suet. But we don't really know why, and it's not very important. Let's move on, shall we? Okay, we know that we need suet or vegetarian suet or some such thing. And we also know that we need sultanas, raisins, and currants. 3 types of partially dried grape sort of thing. Great. And what else? We'll need apples. According to the recipe, we need the same amount of apples as we do suet. Odd. Still, never mind, eh? So we need 225 grams or 8 ounces of apples. Bramley apples. Well, there are loads and loads of different types of apples in the world, but what's a Bramley apple? Well, Bramleys look like this. Okay. So that helps us a little bit. We can take this photo and go to the greengrocer and see if we can identify the correct type of apple, I suppose. The thing which might be more important, the detail which might help us, is the fact that Bramley apples are apparently the definitive English cooking apple. So, if you see an English recipe which involves apples, then those apples should be Bramleys. These apples are the definitive English cooking apple. All the apples have been tried and tested, and everyone agrees that Bramley apples are the ones we should use to cook with. Okay, great, but what if we can't find any Bramley's apples at the greengrocers? What if we have to look for a substitute? What if we need to put on an understudy? What then? Well, apparently Bramley's apples are the definitive English cooking apple for a reason. According to the internet, this apple has a much higher acidity content than American apples. Apparently, this is a good thing. Americans prefer to use apples which retain their shape when cooked, but the British prefer apples which break down and become smooth and fluffy. So the Americans use a certain type of apple because they want to be able to recognize the apple in the dessert. But the British prefer a more acidic taste, a sharper taste. The British prefer a tart, sharp, acidic taste in desserts with apples. Presumably, this is because it creates a nice contrast. The sweetness of the sugar in the dessert contrasted with the sharp taste of the acidic Bramley's apples. I don't know, I'm only guessing here. Anyway, let's get back to the recipe, shall we? All right. So, we know that we need 225 grams of apples, either Bramley's apples, or if we can't find those at the greengrocers, then some other type of apple, one which breaks down when we cook it and has a sharp, tart, acidic taste. And what do we do with these apples? What do we do with our 225 grams of apples? Do we just bung them into the mix? No, no. As we can see from the recipe, there are 3 things that we have to do to the apples. We have to peel them, core them, and chop them. Well, the verb to chop is an easy one, isn't it? Yes, when we chop something, we cut it into pieces. Think about firewood for your open fire. Do you throw a tree onto the fire? No, that wouldn't work. The tree is chopped down and then the tree is chopped into logs, like this. So, when you want to put some wood on a fire, you take an axe and chop the logs into smaller pieces. Unless the fire is burning with an extreme heat and intensity, a log would kill the fire. So we chop logs into smaller pieces of wood and put these on the fire to keep the fire going. Okay, so that's the verb to chop. Okay, and just as we use the verb with logs, when we're splitting the log into smaller parts, we also use the verb with cooking, when we take a large piece of some sort of food and cut it repeatedly with a downwards action into smaller pieces. When you're making soup, you don't put whole carrots and whole turnips into the soup, do you? No, of course not. You chop them up and then put them into this pot to make soup. And that's the same thing that we have to do to the apples in this recipe. We don't put whole apples in to cook, no. We chop the apples into small pieces, okay? And what else do we have to do to them? Well, we have to core the apples, okay? Well, who remembers what a core is? Yes, that's right. The core of something is the very center of something, like the Earth's core. So, that apparently is what the center of the Earth looks like. That's the core of the Earth. Great! I'm not sure if that's where the mole people live. We know that they live underground, but the core of the Earth is probably too hot, isn't it? They probably live a bit nearer the surface, I expect. Okay, so that's what the core of the Earth looks like, but what about the core of a fruit? Well, the core of a fruit is the hard, inedible bit at the center of a fruit, the part where we can find the seeds. Now, to core a fruit is to remove the core. And when we're coring apples, we use a corer to remove the core of the apple, the hard bit which we can't eat. So, this is a corer. And when we've used the corer, this is what we're left with. Okay, and is that all we have to do? No. There's one more thing, isn't there? Yes, we have to peel the apples. And what's the verb to peel? Yes, that's right. To peel something is to remove the skin from it. Do you eat bananas with the peel on? No! Don't be daft. You have to peel the banana before you eat it. Now, with some fruits, like apples, for example, we normally eat the skin too. But for some recipes, like this one, we have to peel the apples before we cook them. All right, that's simple enough, isn't it? Take a potato peeler, one of these, and remove the peel from the cored apples. Of course, it makes more sense to peel and core the apples before you chop them. If you do things the other way around, it'll take ages. By the time you're ready, Christmas will be over and you'll end up making mince pies for Easter. All right, we're getting there, aren't we? Slowly but surely we're getting there. Unfortunately, we're not there yet and we're approaching the end of the lesson. So yes, that's right. It's time for us to call it a day. And that means that we're not going to complete the recipe today. But no matter, we'll get stuck into it tomorrow and see if we can get through most of it then, okay? All right, people, I know that Christmas Day has been and gone, but we're still in the Christmas period, so Merry Christmas to you all once again. Have fun, be nice to each other, listen to your relatives' boring stories with a look on your face which suggests that you're enjoying yourself, and eat and drink your fill. I'll see you all tomorrow. See you later. Have fun, eat, drink, and be merry. Oh, and don't forget to feed the sloths and the llamas. See you later. See you tomorrow. www.mediaclick.hu. Merry Christmas. Bye.